is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's fired. He throws. It is.
Summer is over, fall is here, and that means my favorite season of the year, football season. I'm Scott Johnston.
I'm Bill Mahoney.
I'm Mark something.
And we are the hosts of the Past Our Prime podcast. On the cover 50 years ago, the Steelers' Joe Gilliam. I always thought it was Gilliam, but
So
I think it's Gillum.
Yeah.
Is
it, Mark? You
There's
knew it
a
was
floating
Gillum?
eye in there. He had won the preseason competition
pronounce it
for the
both ways.
quarterback position over Terry Hanratty and Terry Bradshaw. And after a 30-0 win in the season opener over Baltimore, he was on the cover of SI. So we'll have more on that in just a bit. And a guest from that Steelers team that anyone who knows football from that era knows in an instant. Mark, who's joining us?
Rocky Bleier, he is such a heart and soul of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a guy that came over such adversity to become a very important member of that team. And his story is pretty incredible.
Yeah, true war hero.
No question. American hero.
True war hero, no question. But let's start with the letter from the publisher and Stephanie Salter, a reporter from SI who was applying to be a cheerleader for a week with the 49ers. She had a habit of doing these sort of breakthrough assignments, and a year and a half later she was at it again attending the New York Baseball Writers Association dinner. But one catch, men only.
Yeah.
No women allowed. Now, I can see the argument for locker rooms or certain things that might, you want to keep the sexes. But why would it be a dinner only?
Yeah. It was. Yeah.
That's crazy. So she was a trendsetter, no question. There was a time not that long ago when sports reporters were only men. When you said sports reporter, you meant a man. That's not the case anymore. Ms. Salter, one of the first to change that. She would leave SI, spend 28 years with the SF Examiner and Chronicle. Hell of a career. Once she put down those pom-poms and picked up a pen and a paper. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's start with the scorecard. Who wants to go first?
I'll
Mark?
do it. No, Mark, you
Bill?
go. No, Mark, go.
Mark?
Mark?
Bill?
Well,
Mark?
I'll start with the World Cup.
All right.
That's what I was going to do.
Oh, then
No, do it, man. I don't need it. I don't need you.
Right?
So the World Cup, basically, they say that the U.S. chance of making the '78 World Cup is pretty slim. And if you look at the history of the United States in the World Cup, they'd been there 11 times. 1930, 34, 1950, and then a 40-year gap before they made it again in 1990. So you can understand when this article came out in '78, U.S. was playing catch-up. But at least they were being very competitive. Like they had just played Mexican team to a 1-1 tie, and this team had played Brazil, I guess, to the 1-1 tie. The U.S., had some talent. Kyle Rote, I believe, was on that team. His dad was a famous football player.
Superstars.
Yeah, he was an incredible athlete and soccer player. And so the U.S., it's looking up for them. So it's kind of a glimpse as to a dead period, I guess, U.S. competitive with other, World Cup,
But we're
powerhouse
still
teams.
50 years later,
Yes,
still
still
waiting
waiting.
for that
Yeah.
breakthrough.
Yep.
And I'm not talking necessarily a World Cup title, but maybe
Semifinal.
Yeah.
Well,
Semifinal.
round of 16 we made in 2010
Yeah,
and
we did.
2016. And the first World
They're
Cup
getting closer.
we were in 1930, we finished third.
They had Jurgen Klopp turned them down for their head coaching thing. That's never a good, when a great coach doesn't want to coach you. So
Right.
I'm hoping they do well when it comes out here in, 28?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've been hearing for years and years and years how, the US
Yep.
it's going to happen. It's
Yep.
going to happen
Yep.
and it ain't happened yet.
No.
Bill, you got one?
Oh, it's not really. It's just basically a very, during hunting, they talk about the Maine black fly as a tough hombre. It's a nice little thing, though. It only bites by tearing off your flesh and then lances it like blades and slice into the tissue. Then it smears on an anticoagulant to keep the blood flowing and drinks until gorged. That's what it does to humans. But up in Alaska where they hunt, when they shoot a deer, First, they open the belly, and this is to get these black flies off. They open the belly and rub their hands and face with the blood all over them. After the blood dries, mosquitoes never sting them at all, and it always works.
They smell great, too.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I just thought, hey, that's, so if you're ever in Alaska,
Good to know.
and the black fly,
is a
get a
problem.
deer, cut it open, drain yourself,
That's what,
drench yourself in blood.
Larry Zonka does.
Well, that's what also they did in The Walking Dead. They put the blood on them, and they were fine.
Well, you could also do what was it in The Revenant, where Leo DiCaprio
Yes.
gets inside the horse.
Yes.
Could do that too.
See? So
All
there-
sorts of things you can do when a black fly is trying
Yes,
to
I will
stick
not
its
be
things.
held down by a black fly.
I got one. If you're one of those who believes golf is a humbling game, think of baseball as Reggie Jackson does. When you play this game 10 years, go to bat 7,000 times and get 2,000 hits, which would mean that's a 286 batting average
Right.
if you do that.
I did.
You know what that means? Ask the Oakland right fielder. You've gone 0 for 5,000.
Dang.
Billy, they said it.
Oh, yeah, that's Ann Hayes. That's wife of Ohio State's Woody Hayes. Asked if she ever contemplated divorce. Divorce? No. Murder? Yes.
And as we talked a couple weeks ago, when Mark went down the litany of the fiery coach's past transgressions
Yeah.
of attacking media members and opposing players and such, you kind of see where Ann Hayes is coming from.
Yeah.
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 Oh, no bombs, but lots of bullets. The baseball season's coming down to the end, and the Yankees, by all accounts, should be struggling. They're basically a road team that entire season because Yankee Stadium is under renovation, so they're playing their home games over at Shea Stadium. They don't have a true leader, not yet. Their owner, George Steinbrenner, is in legal trouble relating to now former president Richard Nixon. And yet, with 15 games to play, they lead the East by 2.5 games over Baltimore, 3.5 over Boston. The big move was made by manager Billy Verdon, who would be the AL Manager of the Year that year. He replaced Bobby Mercer in center with Elliot Maddox, moving Mercer to right. Mercer was not happy about it, but the results undeniable. Mercer, in particular, 19 assists from the outfield.
Yeah,
That's
great player.
crazy. I didn't realize he had that kind of an arm. Now, sometimes what happens is if you have just a good arm, not a great arm, they'll test you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like guys like Raul Mondesi didn't lead the league in assists all that often because they just wouldn't run on
It was
it.
like Ichiro.
Exactly.
Same way wouldn't run on him.
Bobby Mercer's sort of an unsung Yankee.
He is.
He
He's
really
a
is.
forgotten Yankee.
And in this magazine, there's a beautiful picture of his swing from the left side. Just a picture perfect one.
Yep.
But it's so interesting about the Yankees. So good times are ahead. The Yankees, starting in the late 70s, are become dominant again. But there was a stretch. They won the World Series in '64.
Mm-hmm.
They won or lost to the Cardinals in '64, and then they didn't appear again in a playoff until 1976.
Right.
So there was over a decade drought for Yankee fans. That's tough.
That's crazy, yeah.
And it also didn't. You read about that deal. Yankees traded a series of guys, Fritz Peterson, Steve Klein. But in the deal back, they got Chris Chambliss and Dick Tidrow.
Right.
Key players for their World Series in the mid-'70s. I mean,
Yes.
I hated Dick Tidrow because he was a great pitcher in terms of when he faced the teams I liked. And Chris Chambliss, he had a key home run against the Royals in 77 playoffs
Very-
against Mark Littell.
Very steady play.
Yeah, so I'm saying, some of those deals look small, but what they end up turning into.
Yep. That brings us to our cover story, which is Joe Gilliam on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Gilly was a Steeler driving man by Roy Blunt Jr. Roy Blunt had just written a book.
Spent a year with him, is it?
Spent a
Season
year
with him?
prior
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
Steelers
yeah.
and had written a book. I think it was called 3 Loads Shy of a Brick.
That's it.
And went on to write, 20, 30 books. He's a
Was it 3 bricks shy of a load or 3
maybe
loads
it's
shy of a brick?
Yeah, I think it's 3 bricks shy
Okay,
of a
no, I'm
load.
trying
There
to-
we go.
I
Yeah,
don't know, it might be.
good. Anyway, this Steelers team was just on the doorstep of becoming great. They had been in the playoffs for the first time ever, I want to say, or in 40 years or so, the last couple years. But 74 was the breakthrough, and they were about to become just wonderful. Chuck Noll had a roster that was bursting with talent. The 74 rookie class had 5 future Hall of Famers. But coming out of camp, the three-way battle for the QB position was won by Joe Gilliam. In the season opening 30-0 win over Baltimore, he became the first ever black quarterback to start and win an opening day game in the NFL. Rookie receiver Lynn Swann caught a 54-yard TD pass from Gilliam, who threw 2 TDs in the game. He ends up on the cover of Sports Illustrated. After 6 weeks, the team has a 4-1-1 record, but Gilliam's play has deteriorated. In Week 7, Terry Bradshaw retook the starter's role, and he didn't give it up. So, Bradshaw, I think's rookie season was like 1970, and he was given chance and opportunity and just couldn't play consistently. And it just goes to show you, now we're expecting rookie quarterbacks to go from college to the pro without any. You go back and look at Peyton Manning's rookie year. He threw
John Elway.
28 interceptions and stuff. It's such a different game.
They wouldn't give him 4
They
years.
They had patience for these guys. And Bradshaw, maybe towards the end of that 74 season is when he finally started to reach his potential.
Well, that first game for Gilliam, that 30-0 win over the Colts, was probably his best game he had that year. But you look at Gilliam started 6 games and Bradshaw started 7 games. They both were identical. They completed 45.3% of their passes, and they both had more interceptions than touchdowns. So, Terry becomes this Hall of Fame quarterback, but initially it was a bit of a struggle. And that year, they couldn't complete half their passes. They relied on a defense and a running game and just toughness to win.
They did. And if you go back and look, the NFL back then, they didn't believe in the short pass.
No.
Everything was down the field.
The Al Davis type thing.
Right. So the percentages were much lower. And as you see here, Swann catches a 54-yard touchdown. That was – and so now most long touchdown passes are 10-yard passes that turn into a 60-yard.
Just runs it,
Not back then. Back then, it was throw deep.
Yep.
Different game. And you're right. That was Gilliam's best game. In fact, after he was benched for Bradshaw, he never started another game.
Yeah.
And after 4 games in 1975, his career in the NFL was over. Had some off-field issues, some addiction issues. In 2000, at the age of just 49, he died of a cocaine overdose. So very sad story and ending for Joe Gilliam that I didn't realize.
No, you hear sometimes you read these things, you go, what happened to that guy with sort of a positive bent about it, then you find out and you go, dang.
Yeah.
Very
tough. The 1974 Steelers roster was loaded. Making that team took something special. Rocky Bleier had been drafted out of Notre Dame by the Steelers in 1968, and 6 years later, he had been to hell and back, having to fight to make that team almost every year, but that was nothing compared to fighting for his life. You see, after that rookie season in 68, Bleier was drafted not by the NFL, but by the U.S. Army, and off to Vietnam he went. I won't tell you what happened. I'll go to the source, as they say. Rocky Bleier joins us now from his home in Pittsburgh. Rocky, thank you so much for joining us on the Past Our Prime podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. 50 years, my goodness gracious. Where has that time gone since that first Super Bowl for us anyway in 1974 or that season? So glad to talk to you guys about it.
Yeah, when we have these guests, I can't tell which sounds older, 50 years or half a century.
Half a
century. Hey, Rocky, let's start with that 1974 season, a magical one for the Steelers, really a magical one for the city of Pittsburgh, and for you. Tell me about that team.
Well, actually, let's go back. Take you really back to 1972, I think, at that time. So Chuck Noll comes in 1968-69 as a new coach. He wins 1 game that first season, comes back, he has a good draft, starts, drafting some people, but you never know what's going to happen with that character. So 70, 71, and then by 1972, as we gradually gotten better and quality of people, is the first time in the history of the franchise in 40 years, actually it's for 41st season, 40 years that the Steelers won the division and got into the playoffs, as they said. But it was also an interesting year as well because there was a player strike in 1974. People forget all that. No freedom, no football was the marching flag at that time. And so we were out of camp, or we were in training camp. Everybody was on the quote picket line at that period. So for us who were trying to make the team and be a part of something, that was a tough decision not to go across that picket line and do it. Anyway, so that's how that season starts. Now, Joe Gilliam crosses the picket line and he goes into training camp, and I say that. Not to make a judgment, but I say that only because it gives him time in preparation for that coming season. So once we got everybody back together and started to break, Joe Gilliam is the starting quarterback in 1974. Bradshaw is sitting on the bench. In that first game of 1974, Franco Harris gets hurt. He's not part of that backfield or that our running game as he was in the past and dominated. So all of a sudden we had to operate on a different venue. So Frenchie Fuqua was the starting fullback. Preston Pearson was the starting right halfback. Joe Gilliam was the starting. I kind of got off to a shaky 3-1-1 start in that season. And Joe started to fall apart. And at that time, Bradshaw came back, did not have a couple good games, and then Terry Hanratty came in. So we were playing musical chair with our quarterbacks in and out. So it wasn't a cohesive offense as people would like to remember or think about at that time. And so I got an opportunity to start. Frenchie Fuqua got hurt, and so I was the backup running back at that time. So he got hurt. I got a chance to play, and all of a sudden we started to win, and then we won some more, and then all of a sudden Franco became healthy. So there was about the seventh game of that season. And so all of a sudden it was Franco and I became the starting backfield. I moved back over to halfback out of the fullback position. And so we started to win, and we won some more, and we won the division and got into the playoffs and won the playoffs and got to the Super Bowl for the first time. And so that was kind of like my journey to be able to get there. Now, just to backtrack that, I mean, it was 6 years. I was drafted by the Steelers in 1968, highly touted 16th round draft choice. The 417th person picked in a draft that year. And so I was one of 4 players that made the team my rookie year. And then as that story goes, I got to play 10 games and then got my draft notification and ultimately ended up in Vietnam the following year and got wounded over there. Came back in 1970, got discharged from the military and tried to make the team. And having great owners really help a lot, And so the Rooney family put me on injured reserve in 1970. So I had another operation in 1971. I made the taxi squad or the developmental squad. So they gave me 2 years to kind of hang around and become part of that. And so by 1972, I got a chance to make the team. And as a special teams player, basically, and coming out of the running back, never carried the ball that season in 72, and then 73 came back again. I think I carried the ball once in 1973, and then 1974 comes and unfolds, and you get a chance and you get an opportunity, and partly, it's partly the fact was that I was there. They saw the changes. Me physically, and then the ability to play, and so I got a chance to start, and then we go to the Super Bowl for the first time. But that's 1974.
Yeah, because in that in the Sports Illustrated issue with Joe Gilliam on the cover, it's that first game against the Colts that you shut them out 30-0, and Gilliam had a great game, and the defense was unbelievable, and that was kind of like the theme for the Steelers that season, right?
Yeah, very much so. And the great thing about Joe is that Joe was I thought a great competent quarterback. He was very confident in his ability to lead as a quarterback. He had a very quick release with the ball, calling plays. As I remember in that offense, he took charge. Joe's problem was his own personal problem that evolved during that early part of his career. And part of it was his own insecurities about not being able to be that quarterback in the NFL. He felt it was too small, too thin, not big enough, et cetera, et cetera. And that was kind of, his ultimate downfall. But he got us, he got us started in the beginning part of that season as you will note. And I've always felt that, in the first part of any season, as it has progressed, is that you you can't get yourself behind the eight ball, and I mean, especially if you're playing 14 games, now 17 games, but at that time playing 14 games, you can't lose the first 5, 6 games and think that you're gonna, all of a sudden connect and get going. And Joe gave us that position as a 3-1-1 team.
Back then, Rocky, the idea of a black quarterback was absurd to many. What did that say about Chuck Noll to you guys and the team, that none of that mattered? The only thing that mattered was winning.
Very much so. I mean, and that's the way Chuck. I mean, it's just the way Chuck coached, the way he approached his team. Your ability to contribute to the team was the most important thing. And at that moment in time, going through training camp, Joe was evolving as a young black quarterback, or as a young quarterback, not even a black quarterback, just as anybody in that position. He happened to be black. That did make a difference from our point of view, as long as you're able to accomplish what you want to get done. And he had that talent. I mean, he really did have that talent. As I said, the ability to take control of the offense, understanding the defenses, reading them, making quick decisions, got a quick release. He had a quick release that helped him do his job. And so, yeah, for the rest of us, it didn't make any difference as long as you were able to get along with one another and do your job to the best of your ability.
So let's go back, Rocky, to that right after your rookie year, and you get the draft notice. And the next thing you know, you're not on a football field, but you're... Where are you? I mean, you are halfway across the world, and take me through that experience.
So we got to take it in basically maybe into the listening audience back to 1968. It was the height of the war in Vietnam. So the Vietnam War was taking place. Bodies were needed, student deferment. I remember I was in training camp at the time, and we were up at Latrobe at St. Vincent's College, where we hold the training camp. And it was towards the end of that training camp, and Bill Austin was the head coach at the time. And after practice, he takes me aside, and then he said, listen, we got this letter in the mail. It was accidentally opened, and it's your 1A classification. We think you're good enough to make this team, so we'll take care of this for you. Whatever taking care of this for, all I heard was, you're good enough to make this team. And so, and at that time, taking care of this was, well, get into the reserve with the National Guard, you fulfill your responsibility in serving your country during that period of time. But a lot of ball players were doing that. Well, time goes on, and I fall through the cracks. And it's 1968, the height of the war. We got the most personnel, 500,000 troops over in Vietnam. And so I asked a question to the Steeler front office about this after several months taking care of this, whatever that meant. And we're having a little problem. And the problem is the general retired, the congressman got defeated, all our contacts within the realm of being able to get you to where you needed to go has dried up. But we're working on that. Well, as things go on, it just fell through the cracks. And so I was sitting in front of my locker when all of a sudden one of the equipment guys hollered, Bleier, there's a letter over here for you. Now, in the locker room, there was a table where all the fan mail would be deposited for the players. It was a place I had never visited from that first day of training camp up through that time, the 10th game of the season, not when you're the 417th person picked in the draft, playing on a losing team. I mean, nobody knows you exist. I mean, my mother,
Right.
God rest her soul, never even sent me a letter. And all of a sudden, one of the equipment men, hey, there's a letter over here. I jump up, I walk over, open it up. And it said, greetings. We'd like to inform you that you've been inducted into the armed services of your country. To report the next morning at 7 a.m.
Oh my God.
I go, I thought you were supposed to have a week, or a couple days to be able to adjust and get your stuff together. Well, it was post-dated, and by the time I got it, that was to do the next day. So my reaction time was not much at all. And so all of a sudden, which was somewhat good, I didn't have to think about it. I just have to quickly, get rid of my car and my apartment and send some clothes home and make arrangements for that to be picked up. And I was on the bus going down to Fort Gordon, Georgia, going to basic training. But that just kept me focused going in through that process. Now all of a sudden now you're trying to make it through basic. Now you're trying to find this is a whole new world. People are yelling at you. Sergeants are you got to be here. You got to do this. You got to go through this training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until I get my orders to go to Vietnam. And so then that takes place like thousands of other young men through that period of time who served their country. You find yourself on a plane going to we flew to San Francisco, then from San Francisco to Korea, then Korea to South Vietnam, and ended up in country and with my unit. I was attached to the AmeriCal Division, 196th Brigade, 4th of the 31st Infantry, 1st Platoon, 1st Squad, and that was my period of time. So all of a sudden, boom, you're right in the middle of a conflict. We were up in I Corps, working out of Chu Lai and in an area called Hep Duc. So I was a private PFC, private first class guy.
Can you tell us, Rocky, fast forward a little bit to August 20th of 1969?
We've been in country about 4.5 months in August. Now there was a movement going on. There was a Vietnamese regiment that was moving down from North Vietnam into our area. Intelligence had them coming down this way, and so we were a part of a retaining force with the Marines pushing them down from the north, and we were in the south to be able to retain them. That was the plan, as I had found out years later. So when you're just, when what you get as a private, I was a grenadier. I carried a M79 grenade launcher, and my responsibility was to get firepower on distant places. So I could 100 to 150 meters away. I could lob grenades inward. So all of a sudden, there was a sister company that got hit. We came in to help them get out of the hot spot. In so doing, we're helping the wounded and carrying the dead out at that moment in time. 2 days later, we now have to go back and we're on an open rice paddy and walking out on an open rice paddy, and I was probably fourth or fifth in line at the time. And our point man was maybe 40 yards in front of me. All of a sudden saw movement on the berm, and he hollers, "Gook, gook." And shots break the stillness. They started to run, and he started to chasing them, pulling everybody out of the middle of the rice paddy, when all of a sudden a machine gun started to level the area, and you could just hear the rapid firing going across. And so we all dove into dried up rice paddies that gave us some protection, a little bit, but not much. I rolled over my side. I saw where the machine gun was nestled up in the hillside. My responsibility, because I'm carrying that M79 grenade launcher, was to get firepower on that position. So I rolled over my side, breached a grenade, when all of a sudden I felt a thud in my left leg, and it started to burn and bled, and I was hit for the first time that day. Continued to discharge my rounds until we could silence that machine gun position, drop back behind some protection. So North Vietnamese, moved into our position. All of a sudden, there was an open fire when I saw a grenade come flying through the air, and it hit my commanding officer right in the middle of the back, and it bounced off and rolled between my feet, and before I could jump out of the way, it blew up through the lower part of my legs. And again, we were in another firefight until sister platoon fought its way down and finally dragged us out of there. We got to a secured area, then helicopters came in, took us to an aid station, then to Da Nang where we got patched up, and then I ultimately flew to Tokyo, where I spent 3 weeks in the hospital before I came back to the States, where I spent 9 months in the hospital, went through 3 more operations during that period of time.
Did you think your football career was over then? That was it?
Not really. And as stupid as that may sound at this moment in time, I really didn't think it was, and only because, in the back of my mind, as you process yourself through this time of your life, is the fact is that, hey, think about it. As kids growing up in a neighborhood or playing organized sports from, grade school to junior high to college or thereafter, you get bumps and bruises, you get sprains, you get twisted ankles or knee or something, and, and you get injured and it hurts. And you go see the doctor, then it heals. Then what? Then you're back out playing again, and it's that kind of a mentality process that one goes through. And so I didn't lose in my mind, well, hey, I didn't lose a foot, I didn't lose a leg, I didn't lose an arm, and damage, yeah, but we've been there before, okay? So we will go through the process and see where it ends up down the line. And so that was kind of just my simple mental approach to that situation, having time to heal it and see what takes place. And so once it started to heal, and I was still in the military, I could, get up and start working out again. I could get up and start to jog, not well, but good to get into condition, because my whole thought was getting back to playing again. I mean, that was then my whole approach. And so I started doing the things that all of us do kind of in the off season to get yourself back in shape. So I had gone from over 200 pounds to like 165 pounds. And so I started, putting weight back on and starting, working out again, going to the gym, doing my job in the service before I got out of that, and then I was able to get discharged in time to go back to the Steelers training camp in 1970.
Rocky, to me, you're an amazing American hero. I'm just amazing, because you just compared, you said when you're out on the field, you get bumps and bruises. That happens. Not many people take a grenade on the football field. What you did is amazing. So you're 40% disabled. The doctors are telling you can't play, but in your mind, you're not listening to them. Did you tell the doctors, yeah, I'm coming back? How did you deal with the negativity in terms of, or not negativity, the realism that they're telling you it's over?
Oh, Uh, I'm saying this is that I don't know whether they've been there before. I mean, they're doctors, they're smart people. But have you ever, been hit by a 300-pound defensive tackle, And so you get hurt and picked up, and you kind of go on and on and on. So that's one thing. You can accept what they say, but my mindset was that, as I said before, in reality, is that there's a part of this. There's a part of this that you have to have reinforcements from the outside. 'Cause some people to give you some sense of hope and so on. And one of the stories is that when I was in Tokyo, as I said, just out of the field into Tokyo. After a couple of weeks, as I was in that hospital, after a couple of weeks, I finally got enough courage to ask my physician, what he thought about my possibility of going back and playing football again. And his response was, well, he gave me a slight chuckle and he said, oh, don't worry about it. You're going to have a normal life. You're going to be able to do the things that normal people do. Just don't expect to get back in the gridiron because you just won't have the strength nor the flexibility to do the things that are necessary to be a running back in the NFL. What he had formulated from his point of view, from his stream of information, correct or not in his diagnosis, was a perception about my ability. But as my authority figure, he just sucked that hope right out. Now, 2 days later, I get a postcard in the mail, a simple postcard, unbeknownst to me. It catches up with me. And it says this, it's got 2 lines on it. It said, Rock, team's not doing well. We need you. Art Rooney. Well, they didn't need me, but somebody took the time to care to be able to write this letter and gave you a kind of a sense of hope. And that's kind of the feeling that we had about that family, about Mr. Rooney and that whole organization, that they would give you, the benefit of the doubt, or they would help you, or give you a chance to come back. And so I jumped on that bandwagon as best I possibly could until I got out of the service, but trying to, get back in shape. And so I could go back to that training camp in 1970. And I went back and I went back and it took its toll and it beat me up and day after day after day. And so towards the end of that training camp, I started to limp and go through the process. And eventually, I can remember the last day of training camp. Was after training camp. We were into the exhibition season, went through the exhibition season, and the regular season is right around the corner. And so I walk in to Three Rivers Stadium, to my locker, and looking around, nobody said anything to me like on final cut. There was no note or anything. And I'm thinking, did I make this team? I'm hoping, when all of a sudden I get a tap on the shoulder, and it's our equipment guy. And he goes, Chuck would like to see you. And here's the kiss of death.
Yeah.
And bring your playbook.
Oh, no.
So I went and see Chuck, and he said, listen, we want you to go home, do whatever's necessary, and get yourself back in shape, and we'd love to invite you back next year to trot. Oh, broke my heart. I can remember driving home from practice thinking, what's my future? I was crying and so on. And the next morning, I got a call from Dan Rooney, was general manager, Art's son. And he said, oh, Rocky, he said, I'm very sorry. He said, I wasn't there yesterday. And he said, but I talked to Chuck, and we're going to put you on injured reserve. I want our doctors to take a look at you again and make sure that maybe there's something they can do to help you. Being the fan, and they bought me that year, so I kind of hung around and, had that operation and was just kind of there. And so because of that,
and Rocky,
gave me that chance.
Rocky, you know they're invested in you as well.
As a person.
Right. Yeah, very much so. That they that they're going to give you that chance or whatever it is, and so. And then you have to do something with it. So you got to get yourself in shape. You got to get bigger. You got to get, better. And so that was that was 70, and then 71. As I said, I made the taxi squad, or the developmental squad, as it's called now. So I was around for 2 years, so they could see. By 1972, I have to tell you, I came into training camp in 1972. I weighed 218 pounds. I bench pressed 465 pounds.
Wow.
I squatted over 600 pounds. And and so I got to tell you this. So anyway, here's the first meeting, and Chuck Noll walks in and welcomes everybody to this, all the free agents, everybody. So welcome to this season, blah, blah, blah. There's a couple things that we're going to do is that we hired a weightlifting coach, 1972, first time weightlifting coach in 1972, because what Chuck had found out was that people were losing strength towards the end of the season, and so he wanted to be able to maintain that, to set up a program that had never been set up before. And he said, he goes, and we'll have it broken out. Offense goes one day, defense goes the other day. We'll, skip days, and we're going to go through training camp. And what we don't want, as he looks right at me, are any bodybuilders on this team. And I go, oh man, I busted my rear end for this. But anyway, so that was the introduction to that year, 1973.
You and the Steelers are a marriage made in heaven, because if you think about it, the Steelers were not a successful franchise for decades. And then in the 70s, the 74 season beginning, all of a sudden they become a dynasty. You come into the league and it's a struggle, the Vietnam experience, but you persevere like the Steelers did. And eventually special teams, eventually to running back, eventually to success. So don't you agree that kind of you and the Steelers embody the same thing?
I guess so, if you put it that way, and over what they've come. As I said, 40 years of losing, Mr. Rooney, got into this business not because he was a football addict, it was because he was a gambler, and he played the horses, and he knew some of the owners that also were in the horse business as well, and they said, hey, you should think about buying a franchise in this new league that we have, and so he did. We paid $2,500 for that franchise in 1933, and then moved a North Side Sandlot football team that his brother was running into the fledgling NFL, and so that's how it began.
We're talking with Steelers great Rocky Bleier, and I got to tell you, Rock, your team was chock full of Hall of Famers, but not too many have a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart like you do.
Yep.
Yeah.
What was it like for you in the locker room upon your return?
Well, locker rooms are locker rooms. You've been there, so, guys are guys. Whether you are the number one pick or the last pick or a free agent, is that you got to prove yourself, but you're also part of that group. And so being in the locker room, you get to poke fun at people, and you get to make fun of other people as well as they'll make fun of you. And so I would get my shots, every now and then and so on. And I can remember one time I was sitting in my locker, and for whatever reason, I had this old green T-shirt that I had wore that day to practice, and I put it on, and it was ripped in the side and so on, and it was Terry Hanratty, who was right next to me, was making fun of that shirt, and I had a pair of shorts on as well, boxer shorts underneath it that had a rip up the side. you're just picking on one another. And so he was making fun of my wardrobe that day at that moment. And I said to him very seriously, I said, I'm sorry, Terry. I said, these shorts that I'm wearing here have a very special meaning to me because these were the shorts that I was wearing when I was wounded in Vietnam. You can tell by the rip in the shorts and where I was shot. Oh, Jesus. I'm so sorry. Oh, I didn't mean anything about it. And you go, I got you on that one. So that's, I said,
great.
no, they weren't. They're just old worn shorts. Anyway, so that's what you have
That's awesome.
to ward off people. And people wouldn't make fun, but they'd take their shots every now and then and so on. But that was all part of being in the locker room, as you well know, if you've been in the locker rooms. And so that's it.
Yeah.
Well, that 1974 locker room really, I think, worked. And I think the amazing thing about that 74 team that began the dynasty is the draft. I'm looking at 4 of the first 5 picks in that 74 draft. Lynn Swann, Jack Lambert, John Stallworth, Mike Webster. I mean, my God, that's a Hall of Fame draft.
Literally.
Yeah.
But the other thing, too, is that when people don't remember, I mean, you remember those names because of being in the Hall of Fame and being an impact, is that there was 14 new guys that made the team that year because of being in camp. A lot of the rookies, because they were in camp, because they were there for 2-3 weeks before the rest of the team came in, and so they had that step. And that's you think about it. I mean, yeah, we had the guys that you had made mention. We had those Hall of Fame guys. But then you also had 10 other guys that, contributed, that were rookies, that were, just on a new team, to be able to mold that group together and have a belief to be able to do what we did for the remaining part of that season. Quarterbacks in and out, as I had made mention, injuries here and there, as I had made mention. And so all of a sudden gelling at the right time, which was towards the end of the season, defense gets wrong and getting into the playoffs, and that becomes the important thing.
When did you know, Rocky, that Terry Bradshaw was the man? When did you see, when he was out there, you thought, this is a guy that's going to lead us?
Terry had that ability, out of the quarterbacks. I mean, Terry was tall. Terry was big. He was strong. He had a great arm. He had a quicker release, not as quick as Joe Gillum's, but he had a better. He could run the ball. He was mobile in that factor, which gave us another positive aspect to that offense where he could scramble when he did. So that was it. Terry had that leadership ability. And so as much as we like to make fun of him at times, but there's a lot of it, that takes place in the huddle, interacting with the players, asking what, in all honesty, like, what's working out there? What's not working out there? What would you guys like to run? I always like to make fun of them for doing that. But it was also a part of communication and understanding and input by other guys to say, okay, fine, this works, that works, and so on. Having people like the quality of people that we had, like Mike Webster, Mike being our center, or Terry would then, so he would ask the receivers, saying, he'd say, okay, guys, what would you like to run? And the receivers always wanted a pass play. So you get Lynn on one side and John Stallworth, and it was like stereo. I mean, 2 of them, they were going, hey, we got this one. I'm open over here. I'm open over here. Of course you guys are open. You don't do crap on the field anyway, so you better be open. And so that whole impact was going on. And so what people have to understand, going back to that period, there wasn't headsets, there wasn't communication. Nobody from the sidelines was calling plays in, as they do today. The quarterback, or we had run plays in from the sidelines. We didn't do that a whole lot, although every now and then we would. And I can remember one game we were in a game and we had moved the ball down to the 30-yard line. And we're in the huddle, and all of a sudden Chuck sends a substitute in and calls a specific play. And Terry's in the huddle, and he goes, we're not going to run that play. All right, this is what we're going to run, okay? Let's make sure it works, because otherwise it's my butt. So he called play, and it would work, and we get the first down and so on, and Chuck would be on the side. That was not what he wanted, but he couldn't say anything because it was successful. Anyway, those little things, not that they happened a lot, but they did happen. And so Terry was that kind of a guy. He could make things happen. And I really and truly believe that we would not have won, and I am saying this in all honesty, we would not have won any of those Super Bowls if it wasn't for Bradshaw offensively. That's the kind of impact that I thought he had, the ability to make big plays, having the receivers and having the people, but taking advantage of it. And so he was just that kind of a leader and kind of a player that had that positive, we can do things.
Before that 74 season, the Steelers had won exactly one playoff game. And that one playoff game was the Immaculate Reception with Franco Harris. What do you remember about that in 72 season?
The 72 season. So we got to put all that, you're right. So we got to put all that into perspective, in that season and getting down. We're coming down to the last game against the Oakland Raiders. So I'm on the sidelines. And the amazing thing is this, and I've told this in the past, and I see, over the years, now 52 years since that Immaculate Reception, I think that I have run into 236,114 people that were in that game or saw that game and said, I saw the Immaculate Reception. Okay, fine. I said, no, you didn't. You didn't see the Immaculate Reception. Oh, yes, I did. Yes, I did. No, I said, you didn't. I said, okay, it's this. It was fourth down. It was, fourth down, 7 yards to go. We had the ball down, and what it was, the 16 for the 7-yard line. I can't remember where we were. Bradshaw drops back. So we got 26 seconds left on the clock. Bradshaw drops back, and I said, it's like this. It's like this. It's the winter, and you're driving on the highway, and all of a sudden the snow's coming down and it's sleeting, and you hit black ice, and you spin your car around in circles, and it's going off to the side, and it's heading for this giant oak tree that's sitting right there in front of you. Do you go, oh, I'm going to hit this oak tree? No, you go, oh my God, I can't look, before you crash. That was the same reaction you had when you were watching the Immaculate Reception. Oh, I can't watch it. Oh, not at the end. And then everybody starts cheering, and then you look around, and then you say, oh, I saw it. No, you didn't see it. You saw it on replay, or you saw it on television thereafter, but you didn't see it when you were sitting in those seats, because I was on the sidelines. I'm a player. I'm looking at it. Bradshaw drops back. He's looking around. Now all of a sudden he's scrambling. He looks downfield. He sees Frenchie. He releases the ball. And I said to myself, I can't watch this. And I turned away from it to pretend to do something else, when all of a sudden I hear this roar. What happened? We scored. What do you mean we scored? We scored, yes. Everybody's running down into the sidelines. And so I run down like all the other guys to be a part of that group, but I did not see a thing at all that took place until I saw the highlights. The interesting thing, Franco was a rookie that year, coming out of Penn State. And during practice and ultimately during the games, but this was during practice when we were up at training camp and so on. Anytime Franco touched the ball, or anytime the ball was thrown downfield, Franco would run 40 yards. He would run 40 yards downfield. He'd carry the ball, he'd run 40 yards, jog back. The ball was thrown downfield, he would run 40 yards towards where the ball was and jog back. And so after a period of time, I asked him, why do you do that? Or why are you doing that? He said, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to take place. And so you should always break to the ball, wherever the ball might be, because you never know. And so you don't pay any attention to it. You know, life goes on. Now we got that first season. So, but he breaks to the ball when that ball is thrown. He's not over there saying, oh, and watching the play and seeing it, you know, deflect and then drop to the ground. No, he breaks to the ball because that's what he's learned, that's what he's been taught, and that's what he knows. And he's in the position at the time when the ball careens backwards that he picks it up. But if he's not breaking towards the ball, that play never happens. We never get into the playoffs, and it never sets a tone for the remaining part of the season. But that's what happened at that time, and he scoops it up and he's off into the end zone.
So we do a trivia question on the show. It's called 50-50. I give you a 50% chance of getting a question right, okay? And we're going to actually go to the TV movie they did on you, which is Fighting Back with Robert Urich.
Right.
First of all, did Robert Urich do a good job, did you think, playing you?
Oh, I thought he did a wonderful job. No, he did a good job. You know why? Because, well, one, I identified with Robert Urich. He was kind of like me, tall, good looking, a lot of hair.
That's what I see.
Yeah, that's what I still
saw.
see.
So that's what I saw at all. But, you know, so the thing about Robert was that he was from this area. I mean, he was born in Ohio, right on the state line, and he had played football. So he played football in high school, and he played football, and he got a scholarship to go to Florida State, if I'm not mistaken. And he got hurt in his freshman year there, and he didn't play thereafter, but went into acting. But he was an athlete, you know, and so he didn't have to teach him anything. He knew all that kind of stuff, and we were relatively the same age, and so he could identify with, you know, everything that was going on. And so you know, it was a made-for-television movie. It was a good thing. The only criticism I had, I said there was an incident that took place when I was in Vietnam, and that was when care packages, you'd get a care package from home. They would send you stuff, treats. And one of the things I'd always ask for is instant chocolate mix, so I could have like chocolate milk, you know. And so all I had to do was add water to it and then boil it, and you know, it'd be like and I always looked forward to this. And so in this one situation, in this one scene that was played, was that I'm just getting ready, and I get the fire going, and we broke camp, and I'm sitting there, and I'm cooking my hot chocolate, so to speak, when all of a sudden somebody hollers, "Incoming!" And a mortar comes in and hits. And so we all have to run to safety. And so they walk it up, boom, 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 boom. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, my luck, they're going to hit my hot chocolate. They're going to blow up, you know, and I spent and waited too long for this. Right. And so I was timing them. By the time you could hear it go off, and by the time it landed, and by the time the next one would hit, there was like 15 seconds in between. And I'm calculating my dash. So we're probably maybe 30, 40 yards away. Okay, fine. I know that I can get there and back before they set off the next one. Anyway, so I run, and I get it, and I pick it up, and I came back and into the foxhole. I jumped just as another mortar was hitting. Redid that in the movie. The difference was He spilt his when he jumped in. I did not spill any of mine.
Oh,
Good
What a
man.
rookie.
What
I'm
yeah.
telling you, man. Hollywood, they
right.
ruin
Yeah,
everything.
that's right.
But
Great
by the
hands.
way, you did get the trivia question right without me even asking it. The question was, did Robert Urich, who played you in the movie, ever play college football? And you just
He
answered
did,
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you win the trivia
That's
question.
a first, Rocky.
Yeah.
We have yet to have someone answer the question before it was
Before.
asked.
Yeah.
So that's
You're
very
psychic.
impressive.
Here.
You know, Rock, I grew
You're
up
the
in
best,
Oakland,
man.
and I actually hated you and the Steelers
Yes.
back then.
Oh, yeah? 'Cause I was a
and that,
cow-
Yeah,
and
Bill-
that, and
I
that-
was a Cowboys fan.
Yeah,
We
Bill and I were
hated you.
Cowboy fans, so we
Yes,
hated you too.
And a
And
Rams
Gee,
fan.
thanks for
You
ganging up,
crushed
guys.
us. You crushed us.
But I got to tell you, I sure learned to respect you guys.
love you.
And I've never respected you more than today. So you are something special, Rocky Bleier. Thank you for coming on the Past Our Prime
Yes,
podcast.
yes,
It
thank
was
you.
Rocky, thank you.
More than we could have hoped for.
Thank you,
so
thanks,
much.
you guys. Thanks for having me. You know, it was wonderful. It was fun to be able to reminisce and talk about the good old days. And I appreciate that. Only 50 years, but it was a great 50 years.
Thank you, Rocky.
Yeah, thank you so
Rocky.
much for coming
You the
on.
man.
Okay, thanks, guys. We'll see. I
welcome.
appreciate your time. Good luck
Thank
to you.
you.
Thank you. Wasn't that great?
Awesome.
Yeah, fantastic.
Awesome.
Not just
Like
a
I said about that one thing, I'm like, you have all these Hall of Famers. Literally, there's probably a dozen Hall of Famers
yeah.
on the team. There's one guy in the locker room with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star.
Yeah, yeah. And I loved his story with the shorts. You know,
Yes, yes.
Yes. And
that's
he's
where I
probably
got-
feeling terrible.
The guy's like, oh, what was it, Terry Hanratty?
Yeah,
oh
that's
my
so
God,
great.
What the hell? have I
Exactly.
said?
It's
But
so
that's-
great, man. That was so cool.
But that's respect too.
It is.
You know,
It is.
You don't make fun of guys you don't respect.
Yep.
You just leave them alone.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You do. You find people like, but his life is
Yeah.
And the thing is, I remember I've always grown up and heard, Bob Feller and Ted Williams had to go to, they went in the service and took time off from their career. We just talked to a guy that did that.
I know.
He played, went to war, and then he says, yeah, when you're in high school football, you get tackled, get up and get off the field. I'm thinking, but you're not running from a grenade.
Right.
I mean, just what he has accomplished before and after that time, unbelievable.
Yeah, and then
Just-
to think that you're sitting there in a hospital, God knows where in
Yeah.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
And he's thinking, how am I going to get back on the field?
Yes, and the doctors are telling him, you're done.
Yeah, you'll live
you're
a
done.
normal life.
Yeah, normal life for an average person.
Right.
And his mind isn't thinking, man, I better get a job at the Toyota factory.
Right.
He's thinking, no, I'll be with the Steelers.
Yeah.
And then if you go forward, he was released twice by the Steelers.
Right.
A lot of guys would give up and go, hey, I already made it. I made it in the NFL. I can find
done.
something else. He didn't.
No.
He became a Super Bowl hero, too, when he caught the touchdown against the Cowboys.
4 Super Bowl rings.
Yes. I mean, just incredible.
All right, next up, a Hall of Fame gate crasher. A new Hall of Fame for golf has opened up at Pinehurst in North Carolina, one of the most prestigious courses in the world when it was built in 1907 by famed designer Donald Ross. It hasn't lost any of that prestige in 1974 or in 2024 for that matter, is still considered a masterpiece. The 13 original members of the Hall of Fame is, as you would think, a who's who of golf's all-time legends. I tried
Mention
to-
these guys.
I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable.
All in
isn't
the
it?
same place at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, mention 'em.
The 8 living ones that were there were Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, and Byron Nelson, Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player, as well as Gene Sarazen and Patty Berg, all on hand. Patty being one of 2 women inducted. The other was Babe Dietrichson Zaharias, who may be the greatest female athlete of all time. She passed away in 1956. 4 others who were inducted who were no longer with us: Harry Vardon, Francis Ouimet, Walter Hagen, and Bobby Jones. So that's Mount Rushmore times 3 plus 1. I mean, just a unbelievable. So they were all being inducted. The gate crasher is President Ford, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So President Ford is on hand to take in all these festivities. And I thought the great thing, here's what I loved about this. There's a tournament that then coincides with this, and it's just an unbelievable year for golf. Gary Player wins 2 majors. Lee Trevino puts a difficult year in his rearview mirror by winning the PGA. Ben Crenshaw comes on the scene. Hale Irwin as well. He won with the help of a 16-year-old caddy, from what I understand. That's what I heard. But all 4 of those guys are also are in the Hall of Fame. Player was inducted then. Those other 3 guys. The player everyone's been chasing this entire year, Johnny Miller, who won what? I think he won the first 3 or 4.
Never been done.
Right?
Never been done since then.
He wins the first 3 tournaments. He wins this one. He sets a record for money earnings for a year. He's also now in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So just a golden time for golf to have. It's kind of like Nicklaus seems like he was the go-between like the Hogans and the Sneeds, and then the guys that came after him, the Tiger Woods and all these greats. And to think that he's still with us.
And still revered. And he still seems really lucid and,
Well, and he talks in this article about Pinehurst and all the things he learned about how to design a course. And Nicklaus is a huge designer of golf courses. So
and this Hall of Fame moved to Florida after a while from Pinehurst.
Yeah.
But now it's moving back to Pinehurst for a new facility.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? But it was in Florida for a long time.
Yeah.
Very strange.
And it was fun that the president did play 3 holes with Palmer, Player, Nicklaus, and PGA Commissioner Dean Beeman. And then he played the next 3 with Nelson, Sayers, and Berg, and Congressman Earl Ruth. Then he played the last 3 with Snead, Pinehurst President Don Collette, and the North Carolina Governor John Holshower. Think of that, just being able to play with the president as well.
Right.
And just cool stuff.
Yeah. Now we have something that we don't talk about all that often, Bill, but
comes up a lot.
You love it.
I just thought
rodeo.
I just thought the Indian rodeo was fun, just because it had, it was sort of a tongue in cheek where it says you're supposed to grab this wild pinto, and it's dragged until he loses the guy loses his shirt, and then is flung into the galley, flung gaily into the Zuni band, and then there was an announcer there because guess who was there? A streaker.
No.
Yep, announcer said that the Indian who had streaked across the rodeo grounds was a hoop dancer by the name of Running Bear.
Very good.
I thought maybe.
Good.
I was thinking Mark the whole time. Yeah. And then it says, the object in calf roping is to rope and tie the calf in nothing flat. An Indian named Morgan comes closest to nothing with a time of 14.2 seconds. The bareback bronc riding follows, and the object is to get killed and make the judges believe you are enjoying it. And then riding a bull, this was interesting. There's 2 types of bulls, and I know you guys are big rodeo guys. A spinner bucks fast in a tight circle until the rider can't remember his butt from Wednesday, and then is thrown into the stands to contemplate a different way of life. A hooker bull will catapult the rider forward, then bend his head back and hook the rider off with his horns. Once the rider is on the ground, the bull examines the rider carefully before leisurely placing his sword of horns on him. He then thinks tenderly and stupidly, why was that rider on my back?
Wow.
I've been to a rodeo twice. Have you guys been? Oh, in Vegas, because they do the rodeo there. When I did a blog in Vegas, they let me down. The bull's like in the little ready to come out. They let me hang over and get a video of the bull from the back. I mean, right coming up, and the thing, he goes, just be careful, don't let it crush you. So I hung down, and the bull was on one side. I know I have video, at least I did, of the bull in the gate, ready to go out. And they're massive, mean, huge creatures. And then we'd watch the guy come out, and they'd flip him in 3 seconds.
There's gold in them nuggets. The San Francisco 49ers were last in the West in 1973, but managed to field a winning all-girl team of white-booted ambassadors by Stephanie Salter, as we mentioned earlier at the top of the show. Stephanie had a long and very successful career as a reporter, but she was with SI in 1974 and did a story on being a 49ers cheerleader as a member of the SF 49er Nuggets. In fact, a Niner Nugget is not a cheerleader, and all 20 of them wince at the slightest hint that they are. They don't shake pom-poms or scream through megaphones. They sing, they dance, and they sell the San Francisco 49ers, which was not an easy thing to sell in the early 70s. But they go all over the Bay Area, and then come Sunday at halftime, they've been at a children's hospital on Monday, and then at a local theater on Tuesday, and a car dealership on Wednesday, and they're just promoting the Niners all week. But in between, they're rehearsing to do a couple songs at halftime, And they're out there for like 5 minutes in front of 50,000 people, and then they're done. That's it. On to the next one.
See, now they have the gold rush. So
Yeah,
now
they
it's-
don't have. Yeah, there's no more Niner Nuggets. Because I was looking that
And
up.
those are definitely cheerleaders.
But I did like Salters.
Yes.
Yes. The Salters, they said questions asked during the tryouts. What would you do if a married player asked you to dance at a team party and his wife was there? She said smile and say no thanks. What if a single player asked to take you home? I'd let him. Do you realize if there was any conflict between you and a player's wife, the organization would automatically side with the wife at the expense of the truth? Not around anymore. So they get rid of the,
Yeah.
So you have to answer the questions. Yes, I understand. She was very honest. But yeah, I mean, seemed like a pretty cool thing.
Right?
Get to go around and, and sell the team. Someone comes in, you hand them a sticker and you take a picture and, it sounds fun.
Easier to do when they're doing well.
Yeah, true.
But even still, right? You're selling an NFL team, come out to Candlestick and have fun this coming Sunday. Rare scare for the Bear. Bear Bryant and his Alabama Crimson Tide opened up against an easy one, or so they thought. Maryland had other ideas. Bama scheduled this game in 1970, 4 years in advance, as they do college football schedules. The Terps had improved quite a bit. The Bear liked to open up against a quote-unquote marshmallow, as they called it, kind of a scrimmage that would actually count in the standings. We scheduled this game a few years ago as a sightseeing trip, Bryant admitted last week, but now we are going up there to play a football game, and they escaped with a 21-16 win, an auspicious beginning to the season for Bryant and his team, who came into the game as 14-point favorites over, I believe Randy White was on that.
It was,
Maryland
yes.
team,
Randy
right?
White was on
Great
that
player.
Bryant said, we won the game, but we certainly didn't beat anybody. And that was even more so, Mark, for USC that week.
That's
correct?
right.
The
They lost.
fifth-ranked Trojans.
They lost at Arkansas 22-7, and that was a surprise, as J.K. McCade told us, several weeks ago. And I remember, that game was not televised live. It was a tape delayed. And I remember SC losing their opener and having to watch it late at night, from my memory is. But they rebounded. No one remembers
they did all right.
if you lose your first game.
No,
they
they don't.
remember if you lose your last game.
Yeah. And the assumption now, I think, because we're so used to seeing teams run the table, it's weird to see a team win a national championship with a record of, 9-1-1 or something.
Right.
You just assume that can't be done. But,
Yep.
Now with the playoffs, it's easier to
Right,
take care of.
exactly.
That'll make things a little better.
Tiptoeing on a record. There is a new stolen base record for a season, as we detailed back in July. Lou Brock was on pace to shatter Maury Will's record of 104 steals in a season, and he has done just that, nabbing his 105th. Woo!
Damn.
Brock would end up the season with 118. That record lasted 8 years until Ricky Henderson stole 130 in 1982 for the A's, a record that still stands today. But there's more baseball. A couple relievers were having just sensational seasons, right? We spoke already in depth about Mike Marshall, Bill, but what did he do?
He set a major league mark by appearing in his 93rd game. 93.
That's crazy.
And he still had, 15 more? What is it, 106?
106.
106. So he saw 13 more games he was going to get into.
Yeah.
What did the Dodgers say that Michael Kopech had pitched in 3 of the last 4 games and was gassed?
Yeah.
So they need to give him a couple days off, Dave Roberts said.
Yeah, and
Look at
Marshall
this.
would be a guy that used to
Yeah.
pitch more than one
Right.
inning.
Yeah. Remember Andy Messersmith said when he didn't pitch a day and they took him out after throwing 7 scoreless, he was like, well, we were afraid if we didn't bring him in for 2 days, he might be rusty.
That's right.
You forgot the other reliever. Can you guess what team he plays for?
Probably the Tigers.
Oh, God, you guys are psychic.
I have it written down.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't write that one down.
John Hiller.
Yay.
And in September, okay, how many wins do you think? He was our closer. How many wins do you think he picked?
11.
Yeah, you think that's pretty impressive.
be a
right?
lot.
I
11.
went because I knew you were going to go high.
Right.
So I,
Right.
17 is what he has right now.
Yeah, 17.
Does he really?
17. 17th win. Isn't that crazy?
Didn't they used to call those guys vultures? Wasn't that the name of it back in the day when a reliever would take the...
Yeah, but you have to remember that it was different back
Yeah, it
then.
was,
Pitchers
yeah.
threw multiple innings.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I can only pitch the ninth. What's amazing, he's still alive, John Hiller, 81 years old. And Hiller had a heart attack when he was in his 20s.
Oh. Tell me about those A's, Bill.
Okay. They showed up to support their fans, 48, almost 47,000 of them, showed up to support their struggling team on double dinger night. Dinger is the A's term for a home run, and their rooters celebrate each by rattling an assortment of bells. They said, yeah, they came up with the dinger. I didn't know that. Did you know that?
I didn't know it until I read it, and then I was like, oh, Then I realized that I did know it, but I had just forgotten.
Yeah, I didn't know
they
that.
used to put dinger up on the
they
scoreboard
really?
all the time.
So the bells go ding, ding, ding. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And isn't that the one where Dick Allen announced he was retiring from baseball, effective immediately?
Yeah, he's a strange dude.
Yeah, he did. But after his retirement, he still went on to hit 32 home runs and drive in 142 runs. That retirements just don't stick for some reason.
Yeah.
He played parts of 3 seasons.
Yes. After his retirement.
After his retirement.
Yep.
Yeah, but not with the White Sox.
No.
He retired from the White
He
Sox.
did. He did.
Yeah. All right, next up. This one's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
A grim climax to a thunderous run about a speedboat and much more, right, Bill?
Yeah. Gary Whalen was trying to go faster than 136 miles an hour. That is just a thought about that. But his boat doing it, it said it caught something happened. It was going perfectly, but it caught something in the water. It went up and flipped and basically threw him high above the lake. He hit the water, skimmed violently along the surface, and bounced into the air again. And he was taken to a Phoenix hospital in critical condition with spinal, thoracic, and leg injuries and underwent heart surgery. At week's end, his condition remained critical, but he was improving. He never recovered, and he died 2 years later. He was 28 years old.
Isn't that a picture of him right there?
Yes,
Going in the
Mark.
water?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's
so
it.
there's a picture there, and you
Yeah.
can see his body just flying into the water. It's just insane.
Yeah.
The Asian Games?
Oh, yeah, that. Well, sorry.
Yeah.
In Tehran.
Right. That's
okay. No, okay,
that's
I
the
was
whole
thinking the
thing
other
there.
one.
Is that the big story about this is not the participants necessary, but the location. Yes, in 1974, the Asian Games took place in Tehran, Iran, 5 years before the Islamic Revolution sent that country backwards. But this event was filled with politics thanks to the Chinese, who wanted Taiwan out as the representative of China in the 76 Olympics. For that to happen, they needed to get Arab countries to get on board with them. So they started a boycott against Israel and their athletes, which is lovely to think that
Things haven't changed.
we haven't
No, it
made
hasn't,
much
man.
progress in that
50
regard.
years. 50 years.
Someone said in the article that they would have China was doing it just for political. So if it meant there were a whole bunch of Israeli states that they needed to get on board to get Taiwan out, then they would have sided with them. But since there's only one Israel and there's a bunch of Arab nations, they chose being anti-Semitic instead. But anyway, China and a lot of those countries are lovely, aren't they?
Yes.
Next up, though, Billy,
This
Speed
is the
with Style.
positive.
This was the
Yeah.
one. This is the tragic story of Peter Revlon and his racing career, an excerpt from a book he wrote with Leon Mandel that was published, spoiler alert, posthumously. Bill, he was the heir to the Revlon
He
fortune,
was.
but he certainly liked to drive fast. He and his brother, from what
Yeah, he was a good
I
driver.
read,
He was a
and
good
the
driver.
results were tragic, weren't they?
Yeah, he said that he was at a circuit near Johannesburg, South Africa, and is practicing for the Grand Prix, the third Grand Prix of the season. After 191 miles of testing, his speeds were steadily climbing, and late in the afternoon, he decided to make a run for the track record. He pulled in for 5 gallons of fuel and rolled away. 2 laps later, he was dead. His car crushed against the steel barrier on his latest turn. I think he was going 150 miles an hour. And yeah, you're right. He lost his brother Doug prior to that,
Like
and then
6
he
or
lost
7 years earlier.
Yes,
right?
and then he lost a friend weeks before that in another crash. So I'm just saying, it's just, and this guy, you look at someone, he was the Revlon fortune. He was the heir to it. So he really tried. At first, he went by Jeffrey Revson, but then he put Revlon Revson so everyone knew. But I'm saying, you think you have all that money and you can do anything you want, but there's still, a little bit of a desire to make your own mark, and that's why he did it. He wanted to make his own mark, and he was actually doing it. He was a teammate of Johnny Rutherford in 1973 when there was the big crash. What is it? The two fatal accidents. He was his teammate there and found out he was all right. So he had obviously gotten to a point where he was big enough and making money enough to not use the Revlon as his way in.
Right,
It's just
right.
a tragic end. And they said he was I mean, obviously, he was a ladies' man, good-looking guy, but they said he was a wonderful man. But you know what? It's always that thing. One more time for a lot of these guys. Oh, I'm gonna break the record, and then, something bad happens. But he was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to. I may have brought it up when we were talking to Bubba Blackwell, but he retired, I want to say, in 2015.
Yeah.
And there's a quote from him saying, "I don't want to be like these other guys."
Right.
Blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
You go one too many.
And then I saw made a jump in 2016,
Yeah.
and that I had read about, and I was going to ask him, and I didn't get a chance to.
Yeah.
And then he said he made another jump in 2020,
yeah.
and I'm like, Bubba.
You're
You want to
rolling
not
the
make
dice
the
then.
you
Yeah.
don't you want to make your last jump when you decide it's your
Yes.
last jump,
Yeah.
not when the other factors decide it.
Right.
And that was now this guy was young though, right?
He was
in his 30s.
It was, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
look,
and he was
had
getting married to
expensive
Miss
toys.
Universe. He was engaged to Miss Universe.
Wow. I mean, you have to think of it this way: life is a bunch of chances. You could
True.
walk out of the street
You try,
and
Mark.
get by a car. Your car doesn't start initially, and you leave 10 seconds later than you normally would, and that prevented you from getting into a car accident.
That's right.
You just never know.
right.
Everything, is.
But we didn't mention it when we talked to the story about Lee Trevino had been struck by lightning a few times. And here's another guy. I mean, we don't know when it's going to end, so you just sort of got to live your life. But still, it's always that, let's do it one more time. I'm going to break the record, and that's when it ends. And
Yep.
I mean, just terrible.
Let's put a bow on this thing,
Yeah.
huh? For the record, Mark.
Oh, Fred Williamson officially fired from Monday Night Football.
Boy, that didn't last long.
No, it didn't. But the Hammer, still had a successful career doing, movies and TV, and I love him in Dust to Dawn. Right?
Yeah.
Did they give a reason as to why? Just not a good fit? Or
Well, he was just he. I guess he had come out with the shirt undone and the chains and everything on. He was a little bit too. Nowadays, he'd be absolutely a billionaire.
Right.
But at the time, they were a little more buttoned down. So I think he was sort of
But
coming
they,
off. A
like
little
I've
too-
said before, they knew what they were getting.
Yeah, exactly. What I mean.
So it's very strange.
Yeah.
He didn't. There wasn't like he said one thing
Yeah.
that was like, can't do that. Faces in the crowd, Billy.
Paul Crump, Torrance, California, scored 53 goals in 30 games to help his team win the ASO championship. He was 10 years old. And then you go up, 11 years. His senior year at UCLA, Crump's UCLA team defeated American University 1-0 in 8 overtimes in the championship game. He was an assistant coach at Loyola Marymount, but he has his own soccer camp and still doing quite well for himself.
Good for him. Great.
Yeah.
Great. And lastly, but not leastly, the 19th hole.
The doctor that was down in the water when Evel Knievel's rocket went down there.
Ah, yeah.
He talked about Evel Knievel. He said he is a showman. He's a showman. He's a braggart, but he is as courageous as they make them and a hell of a good guy. No one was ready to save him in the water, and he came within an inch of dying. He is a brave man, and this was no program stunt. This was a gutty trick by a guy who committed himself too quickly. He probably made more money this way, but I can tell you he earned every cent of it. I salute Evel Knievel and will forever be a staunch admirer of his. Walt Blackadar. He was the MD that was down there.
It was a ill-fated attempt by Evel, and
Wait till you get to our 16th. They show it. Yeah, I think Mark might even have the magazine here.
Yes, I do.
You see the rocket. They show the rocket going. Once it comes off, the parachute's already coming out.
yeah. Hey, I want to say thanks to Rocky Bleier for coming on and sharing his incredible life story. Life's a lot more than yards rushing and touchdowns, isn't it? It was great
Sure
talking with
is.
him as the Steelers were about to take off and become a dynasty. So, time for us to stop talking, which is good because I got nothing left to say. So, for Mark and for Bill, I'm Scott, and we are past our prime.